Hi besties and welcome back to my trash channel. I was gonna upload this one shot on a later date but no. Here it is, distraught face. Enjoy the video. Sakusa groaned, a hand resting on his burning forehead. His head hurt so bad he thought he was going to die. What type of teacher sets their students' work due on Christmas Day, with little to no notice? His apparently, and he felt like killing them for it. He had already had a stressful morning and the last thing he needed to do was complete an assignment. So he just didn't do it, figuring that he could just do it tomorrow. It was better late than never, but that didn't change the fact that he was stressing out about it. Christmas Day is meant to be filled with joy, a break from stress, worries and work. So why was he having the worst day of his life on what should be one of the best days of his life? Was he being punished for something? All these thoughts exhausted him. He letting out a sigh and practically flinging his phone across the room in frustration. He instantly regretted it, but didn't bother going to retrieve it. He lacked the energy and morale. The day had exhausted him and it was still only the morning. It was only the morning and he already felt like falling back asleep, wishing the day had never even happened in the first place. He sighed again, both his palms pressing to his face. It was only the morning, and he had already fallen out with his parents. But was that really a surprise? They had little to no patience when it came to him, and paired with a stubborn Kayumi, they were bound to clash. They had been invited to spend Christmas with their aunt. The aunt Kayumi didn't even like his aunt on his father's side of the family, meaning Komori wouldn't even be there. It was just the last place he wanted to spend his Christmas. He'd usually spend his Christmas alone in his bedroom. He didn't exactly treat it as any other day, and he kinda liked it that way. Kinda. It would sometimes make him feel down. Watching YouTube and all sorts of Christmas ads would pop up, glamorizing the holiday and making it seem like the best day you will ever experience in your entire life. And here he was, sat in his room, alone. But that's just how things were. He'd already settled on the idea that he was going to spend the rest of his life alone. He didn't particularly like the idea, but it was better than giving himself false hope for something different to that. It's not like he hated Christmas. He just had no one to spend it with. No one that he'd even want to spend it with. Well, almost no one. He'd always enjoy the build up to Christmas. The pretty lights and all the snow could always lighten his mood, as well as the pure and happy looks he would see on people's faces as he'd walk to school. Yet in the end, Christmas Day would always end up shitty. But maybe that was because he didn't make the effort to enjoy it. Instead he'd hide in his room until it was all over. It's pathetic really. He groaned for what must have been the 100th time that same hour. He didn't even have the energy to think properly, let alone even think about socializing and enjoying this horrific day. So instead, he settled on doing what his body wanted, his tired eyes blinking slowly until they didn't blink again, his eyes fully shutting as he let out a yawn. Maybe what he needed was a good night's rest, or to just sleep the day away. Either way, he eventually found himself falling asleep. Quiet yawns escaping his lips. It wasn't long before his breath softened and his whole body relaxed. He was somehow exhausted, so falling asleep wasn't exactly the hardest of things to do. He wrapped himself up in the warmth of his comforter, shielding him for the bitter cold of winter, and he soon fell asleep. Sakusa mumbled, his eyelids scrunching up for a moment until he relaxed them, his eyes partially opening just so that he was able to see the empty space of his bed next to him. He mumbled again, his eyes once again closing until he eventually opened them, this time fully. He wasn't exactly sure of what day it was or what time it was. Was Christmas over yet? Was it now the 26th? Did he sleep the whole way through the day or only for an hour? His phone not being by his side where it usually was wasn't a help. He rolled over onto his other side, just so that he was facing his window, the curtains hiding the answers he needed from him. He used a hand to pull back one of the curtains and was surprised to not be blinded by the sun. It was dark out and probably in the evening, but it could have also been around 4 p.m. It was winter and it began to get dark strangely early. He groaned and flopped back onto his bed, realizing that the day probably wasn't over, but he'd still like to confirm that idea as his eyes searched his room for his phone. His eyes eventually planted on a rectangular object positioned on his floor, which he assumed was his phone. He hummed to himself as he shuffled to the edge of his bed, then reaching his arms out as far as he could to the floor, His fingertips were barely able to touch the object, but it was just enough for them to be able to drag it closer to him and pick it up into the palm of his hand. He then rolled back so that he was in the center of his bed. He took note of how quiet it was, and after reading the time and date on his lock screen, Saturday, the 25th of December, 8:38 p.m., he assumed his parents were still out, and that gave him some kind of comfort. Though he soon locked eyes with the large amount of notifications he had received, his eyes went wide and his cheeks heated up as he practically flogged himself out of bed reading who the notifications came from. 51 new messages from Atsumu B, and 25 missed calls from Atsumu B. It wasn't exactly abnormal for Atsumu to message him 100 plus times, but he'd usually never call him. Sakusa raised an eyebrow, calming down from his flushed state and unlocking his phone, taking a moment to actually read the messages. In Atsumu B and Kyo face with medical mask. Is private messages. Today at 2:39 p.m. Omi. Are you there? Come answer the door already. I came to see ya. Yeah, not out right? Keyboard spam. No, you can't be out. You would have brought your phone. Omi. I'll just wait for ya. Today at 3:05 p.m. Omi. Where are you? Is no one home? There's a car out in front. Wait, does your family have 2 cars? I guess you really are out. What was I thinking? Of course you'd be busy on Christmas. I'm such an idiot. Oh well, it's too late to go home now. My parents will be mad. I'll just wait to see you, Omi. I hope you come home soon. I got you something. Keyboard spam. Today at 5:45 p.m. Omi. Why aren't you answering your phone? You're not ignoring me, are you? I'm sorry, Omi. I don't wanna bother you. Fuck. I don't know what to do. I can't exactly go home. The last thing I need is my parents shouting at me. Plus if I do go home then I would have wasted the time could have spent with you. But it's getting cold now. Fuck winter. Keyboard spam. Shit. My phone's dying. It's on 20%. You better come home soon, okay? I don't know how much longer I can last here. It's fucking cold. Today at 7:23 p.m. Omi. My phone's gonna die. Fuck, I don't know what to do. What should I do? Should I go home? Where the fuck are you, Kayumi? I'm freezing. I feel like I'm gonna die. My head hurts. I feel like I'm gonna pass out. Omi. Sakusa's eyes quickly widened and the blush on his cheeks instantly vanished as he felt his face go white. Was Atsumu okay? Was he still waiting? He wasted no time in checking, rushing out of his room and almost jumping all the way down the stairs, the whole time his mind running wild. He swiftly unlocked their front door, not even bothering to close it as his eyes landed on the familiar figure of Atsumu. He sat down on a chair at the left side of Sakusa's porch, his head resting on the glass table in front of him. He had to have been out here for hours, and in such cold weather. Sakusa quickly hurried over to him, placing a concerned hand to the back of his neck as he began to shake him awake, his palm instantly being met with an unforgettable cold. His skin was freezing. It felt like he had just rested his hand on an ice cube. What was this idiot thinking? Waiting out here for him in the blistering cold. Atsumu. He called out for him, yet received no reply, his hand shaking him faster this time as he began to panic, his breath peaking. He didn't know what to do, pulling at the back of his own hair aggressively in an attempt to cope with the panic, though he didn't have to for long. Here a few quiet mumbles came from the boy next to him. Achu. He crouched down beside him, his face inches away from Atsumu as he continued to shake him, the blonde continuing to murmur until his head rolled to his side. Sakusa saw his face for the first time in ages, though it was unlike every other time. His face was a white shade and his nose bright red, parts of it shading blue. His jaw clenched, using his left hand to continue shaking him and the right to softly caress the side of his ice-cold cheek. He letting out one large deep breath of relief as he saw the boy's eyes open, Atsumu now coming back to his consciousness, his golden orbs meeting Sakusa. His quivering bottom lip homing a smile as he reached his hand forward to rest it to the side of Sakusa's face. Sakusa slightly startled by the cold, but he didn't move away, relieved that he was actually okay. Omi? Atsumu, what were you thinking? Sakusa smiled softly, wiping the tears that had surprisingly started to form in his eyes. He stood up, grabbing Atsumu's hand that he could visibly see, forcing the boy to sit up, though his back still slouched. Let's get you inside. Sakusa grabbed Atsumu's two free hands, pulling him up enough so that he was able to stand. He then began to walk to the door. Atsumu looked like he didn't even know where he was, but he followed behind Sakusa since he trusted him, still holding on to one of his hands as he forgot to let go, or he just didn't want to let go. Sakusa this time remembered to close the door as well as lock it, pulling Atsumu into his living room, which was also conjoined to his kitchen, a counter separating both rooms. He sat him down on his couch, grabbing a blanket from a basket just next to it and quickly wrapping Atsumu up in it. Sakusa was known to get cold easily, so they had a lot of blankets in the house. Omi, you're a dumbasachu. What were you thinking? It's freezing outside. How long were you going to wait there for? I just wanted to see ya. Sakusa sighed, his face dropping for a second before it formed a soft smile, his hand reaching up to caress the side of Atsumu's, though he quickly removed it, realizing what he was doing, his cheeks heating up in a red shade. Atsumu didn't seem to have any reaction to it. He still seemed dazed and probably had no idea what was happening. You seem half asleep. He sighed and reached down to grab two more blankets, swiftly throwing them over Atsumu, the blonde laughing. I'll go make you hot chocolate and I'll turn the heating up. Wrap yourself up, okay? And don't you dare pass out on me. I'll get worried. Sakusa received a mumble as a reply, the blonde throwing the blankets off of himself as he shuffled down into the couch, settling his head down on a pillow. Sakusa was just about to shout for him to put the blankets back on himself, but Atsumu had already begun to do it, pulling one of the blankets back onto himself before reaching back for another. Sakusa couldn't resist helping him, straightening out the two blankets that were already on top of him and placing the next one neatly over him, tucking the corners in around him so that he was wrapped up like a burrito. Sakusa thought he could already see the color coming back to Atsumu's cheeks, the blonde giving him a heart-warming smile. I'll go make us drinks now. Stay here. Okay. Atsumu nodded, tucking his mouth underneath some of the blanket, breathing into the fabric so that it would heat up his face. Sakusa smiled, reluctantly walking to the kitchen. He could just stare at Atsumu's face for hours on end and not get bored. He began to prepare himself and Atsumu drinks, taking a mental note to add a large swirl of whipped cream and lots of marshmallows since Atsumu had mentioned that that's how he liked over a FaceTime call one time. Sakusa had had a sort of admiration towards Atsumu long before he even met him in person. He'd remember his middle school coach telling them all to watch a clip of one of the Mirror Twins games and take note of how they played in case they ever went up against them in a match. Ever since he first saw him, he was amazed by his skill as a setter. And then he met him in person. They met at a training camp during first year and it was easy to say Sakusa was pumped to hit one of his sets. He remembered their first interaction. He immediately assumed that Atsumu was a cocky, self-centered dickhead. Just something about him made his heart flutter, a feeling he had never felt before. Knowing the Atsumu he knows now, Sakusa would never assume those things of him. He wasn't self-centered at all nor a dickhead, yet he still was a little cocky at times. But these were all things that made Sakusa like him. From their first meet, Sakusa clearly had a crush on Atsumu. He loved the way his heart tingled at the minor thought of him. At first he used to hide his feelings the best he could, but after time, and after many more meetings at training camps, he began to show more affection. Letting Atsumu know he was comfortable with him by standing close to him or giving him a high five if they scored a point together. They'd even hugged a couple times and he'd die to see that same look on Atsumu's face when he first wrapped his arms around him. So lively, so bright, so full of honest and pure joy. He looked adorable and Sakusa thought his heart was going to jump out of his chest the whole time. Atsumu must have noticed how flustered he was. Now he'd be able to just touch Atsumu without any major thought, and holding Atsumu's face almost became a habit of his. He just loved admiring every inch of his beauty and he'd just sometimes get lost in it. Sakusa hummed, waiting a moment for the blush on his cheeks to calm down before he walked back into the living room, two hot chocolates in hand, one with no toppings and one that looked like he had just shoved an ice cream cone on top of it. He placed them down on the glass coffee table, ushering Atsumu to sit up, which he complied to. "Here's your whipped cream." "Thank you," Atsumu said almost too joyfully, taking the mug from Sakusa's hand and dipping his finger into the top of the pile, then sucking the sweet taste off of his fingers. Sakusa smiled. The color had started to come back to Atsumu's face. He already looked almost normal. But admiring him would have to wait for another time. He did have questions after all, but Atsumu bet him to it. "Omi?" "Yes?" Atsumu looked up quickly, making eye contact with Sakusa as his finger swirled nervously around the edge of the cup. "Why didn't you answer the door? Were you out?" "I didn't really see where you came from. I passed out at some point, and I don't remember when. You didn't leave me out there on purpose, right?" "What?" Sakusa's mouth opened as he checked to see if Atsumu was being serious or not, fundamentally finding out that he was. Who did Atsumu think he was? He wasn't some sociopathic idiot who didn't give a fuck about him. He would never purposefully leave Atsumu out in the cold, or outside his house in general. Was Atsumu insecure about whether he actually liked him? Was he not showing enough affection or something? "Atsumu. I would never. I care about you, Atsumu, even if I don't show it at times." "Omi." Atsumu sniffled and Sakusa could see small droplets forming in his eyes despite Atsumu trying his best to hide it. Sakusa took the mug from Atsumu's hand, placing it back onto the coffee table behind him so that he was able to wrap the poor boy into his arms. Atsumu was slightly startled at first, but he soon melted into Sakusa's heat, burying his head into Sakusa's shoulder as he began to let out quiet, almost inaudible sobs. "I was scared, Omi. Not of the cold or anything. Well, maybe a little. I was scared you didn't like me anymore. You weren't answering messages. I didn't know what you were doing and I'm still don't know what you were doing. I came here just to see you and I was scared you were bored of me or something. I wanted to spend Christmas with you and I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. I just don't want you to get bored of me, Omi. I value you so much. So much. Just the thought of somehow losing you makes me wanna cry." Sakusa held him tighter as the sobs began to increase. He felt his own eyes and mouth begin to tug, his face forming a frown and his eyes unexpectedly watering. He too dug his head into Atsumu's shoulder, clutching him ever tighter if it was humanly possible. He had seen Atsumu cry only once before, so he wasn't entirely sure what to do other than to assure him that his insecurities were completely irrational. "Atsumu. I would never do anything, ever to try and purposefully hurt you. I wasn't out or anything, but don't be alarmed, okay? I would never purposely leave you outside my house with no answer, especially it was as freezing cold as it is. God, I feel like an idiot for saying this now, and I feel so guilty knowing I hurt you over something so dumb. I fell asleep at around 10 a.m. this morning, and I just woke up. I promise I'm not lying at you. I wish I didn't fall asleep at all now. I would have loved to spend the whole day with you. I've missed you so much. Atsumu, I'm not bored of you, and I never will be. You make me so fucking happy I can't even put it into words. You're not going to lose me. I promise. I promise. I promise." Atsumu's sobbing became less frequent, the blonde pulling away just enough so that he was able to make eye contact with Sakusa, their faces practically centimeters apart. Sakusa couldn't help but blush. He trailed a hand to the back of Atsumu's head, running his fingers through his hair affectionately. Atsumu showcased the same amount of affection, his hand pressing to the side of Kayumi's face. "You're an idiot." "What? Me? How? What do you mean how? You left me of all people, me, the one and only Atsumu Mia outside on your front porch for hours. And for what? So you can take a nap? I'm sorry." Atsumu laughed, whipping the tears from his eyes and then from Sakusa's, a smile making itself at home on his perfect face. "No need to act so serious, Omi. I'm with you now, that's all that matters, and that makes me happy. I get to spend the rest of my Christmas with you, Omi. How cool is that?" "Very. Thank you, Atsumu." Sakusa's cheeks flushed once again, Atsumu's last few sentences running laps inside of his head as he tried to calm his cheeks down, his instincts automatically making him pull away from Atsumu, but the boy clung onto him tightly, pouting as Sakusa tried to pull away once again. "Atsumu? Aren't you gonna let go? Shut up, Omi. I've been neglected by you for the past few hours. Now shut up and hold me. Plus, I'm still cold. Yeah, warming me up. Sakusa smiled to himself, a vibrant blush dusting on his cheeks, which was luckily hidden as he tightened his arms around Atsumu once again, burying his head back into the blonde shoulder. They stayed there for quite a while, Sakusa waiting for Atsumu to calm down as much as he could, which took a long time, but it wasn't like Sakusa was complaining. He'd stay there for the rest of his life, simply letting him sob into his shoulder if that's what Atsumu needed. But he eventually recovered from his panic, pulling away from Sakusa and sitting straight on the couch. Sakusa did the same next to him, debating if he should even ask anything, but he decided to anyway. Achu. He turned his head to look at Kayumi, a soft smile on his lips as well as slightly pink cheeks that made Sakusa's heart skip a beat. If you don't mind me asking, why didn't you go home? I mean, you were out there for hours. Couldn't you have gone home instead? Why? Do you want me to go home or something? What? No, of course not. I'm happy you're here. Sakusa looked downwards, an attempt to hide his blush that he assumed was obviously painted across his face, despite it only being a light tint to his cheeks. Atsumu had his own way of hiding his blush, a hand pressing to the side of his cheek as he buried his face slightly into the blanket. It was freezing, Atsumu. I knew you'd find me eventually. What if you froze to death, Dumbus? Omi, I wanted to see ya. I wanted to spend my Christmas with ya. I fell out with my parents earlier, and, I don't know. It just didn't feel right going back. So you were gonna kill yourself instead? Oh, shut up. It wasn't intentional. You're the one who didn't answer the door. Right, but, what do you mean you fell out with your parents? I mean I fell out with my parents? I didn't think that would be hard to understand. Sakusa scoffed, aiming a half-assed death glare at Atsumu who just laughed in reply. You know what I meant. I don't. Please enlighten me. Sakusa sighed, pulling his legs up onto the couch and cradling them between his arms. Atsumu watching him almost too intensely despite knowing what he was going to ask. What did you fall out with them about? Is it anything serious? Or? Atsumu sighed, looking up towards the roof almost like he was deep in thought. I wouldn't exactly say serious. It's not like someone died or anything. I just told them I wanted to spend Christmas with you, and they weren't happy about it. For well, I guess, obvious reasons. They said Christmas is a holiday that we should spend as a family, and I get that. I don't know. I was clearly in the wrong, but I decided to come see you anyways. I've really missed you, Omi. He looked up to Sakusa, a soft smile on both their faces and a red shade tinging at their cheeks. Something about Atsumu missing him tugged at his heart. We were also going round to visit my aunt, and she's such a bitch. Sakusa audibly laughed. Atsumu looked at him confused for a moment before he felt his face tug and a small snicker fell out. Something about Sakusa laughing just made him want to copy his actions. I guess we're both in the same boat too then. What? I fell out with my parents today too, but it's not like it's my fault. It's the bitch who decided to set homework due on Christmas. Who sets homework on Christmas? That's just one of the things you don't do. Exactly what I was thinking. I don't know. She's a cow anyways. Either way, my parents wanted to go to my aunt's for Christmas and I fell out with them because 1. I couldn't be bothered. 2. My aunt's a complete cow. And of course 3. I had homework to do. Atsumu chuckled, taking in a deep breath while trying to control his eyes from directing themselves towards Sakusa's lips. I guess we're similar in having shitty aunts then. I suppose so. Komori wasn't going to be there either, so I didn't really have any real reason for going. Isn't Komori your cousin though? Yeah, but he's on my mother's side of the family, the side that we're more close to. So I'm not exactly sure why we were going to my other aunt's. Atsumu sighed, the idea of his family coming back into his mind. He really hoped he didn't anger them too much or ruin their Christmas. It was true, what he did was selfish of him and it would be understandable if they were mad, but even if he could go back in time, he wouldn't change it, because he really did want to spend his Christmas with Sakusa, alone. You okay? Just thinking about my family. I hope they're not worried or angry. Oh, they'll be angry alright. Atsumu scoffed, rolling his eyes as he shot Sakusa a middle finger, the spiker laughing in exchange, subconsciously shuffling closer to the blonde. Not helping. What? I didn't mean it like that. Yes, they'll be mad, but they'll forgive you. I'm sure of it. I hope so. Ugh. I hope I didn't hurt my aunt's feelings. Didn't you say you didn't like her? What changed within a second? What? Of course not. I still hate her disgusting guts. But still, she acts nice to my face and I wouldn't wanna hurt her. Even though she chats shit behind mine and Samu's back to Ma when we're not there. But then again, that's what me and Samu do to her as well, so I can't exactly complain too much. She's still a bitch though. Sakusa chuckled through his breath. He and Atsumu turning to one another and creating prolonged eye contact, both of their cheeks flushing a loving pink and their eyes dazed. Atsumu subconsciously bit his lip, their faces drawing nearer and nearer until they were practically sharing one another breath. Sakusa watching Atsumu's every move until he realized what was happening, his whole face heating up into a vibrant red as he panicked and quickly shuffled back, slightly startling Atsumu, who was a little bit confused at first. But his lips allowed him to let out a small yet adoring laugh as he looked Sakusa up and down, admiring his flustered state. Do you wanna go to my room? Atsumu nodded, neither commenting on what just happened and both of them pretending like nothing even happened in the first place. They didn't have the confidence nor the right mind to dash. Hi besties, I hope you enjoyed this video. Sorry, but I have to split this into 2 parts. I didn't really want to make a 50-minute long video. But either way, the next part will be uploaded tomorrow. So yes. Anyways, I'll see you in the next vid. Bye.